The bright white lights of the CNN studio shimmered off polished glass and chrome, washing the room in a tense, almost surgical glow. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat poised beneath the glare, her dark blue suit crisp, her expression calm but alert. Across from her sat Kash Patel, the former senior Defense Department official whose smirk carried the confidence of a man used to dominating political talk shows. Every camera in the studio focused on the two of them. The control room murmured. Across America, millions of viewers leaned in, sensing they were about to witness something explosive. Moments earlier, Patel had leaned forward, resting his elbows on the glossy desk, his grin sharpened by condescension. "You know what's funny?" he said, voice smooth but dripping with disdain. Congresswoman Crockett likes to parade around as a legal scholar, but she doesn't even grasp basic constitutional law. Maybe she should head back to law school before lecturing anyone about the Justice Department. A gasp rippled through the audience. The moderator's eyes darted nervously between the two. Patel leaned back, folding his arms in satisfaction, convinced he'd just humiliated the freshman congresswoman from Texas. Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she allowed a faint smile to flicker at the corner of her mouth. Slowly, she reached for the folder beside her, sleek, leather-bound, heavy with evidence. Inside was something Patel hadn't anticipated, documentation that could turn his smug confidence into national embarrassment. The silence before she spoke stretched long and electric. "Mr. Patel," she said evenly, "are you sure you'd like to stand by that statement?" Patel chuckled. "Of course." Then she opened the folder. The broadcast was part of a highly promoted CNN special, Democracy in the Balance, a primetime debate about tensions between Congress and the Justice Department. Moderator Michael Barnes, a veteran journalist, had anticipated a lively discussion, but not a political firestorm. Kash Patel arrived that evening with his usual swagger. At 43, he had built his reputation as one of the Trump administration's most combative loyalists. His hair slicked back, his tailored suit impeccable, his watch gleaming beneath the lights. He looked every inch the polished insider. "Good to be here, Michael," he said as he took his seat, ready to set the record straight. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett was the picture of measured composure. At 42, she'd been in Congress less than 2 years, but had already made national headlines for her fearless questioning during hearings. Before politics, she'd been a civil rights attorney in Texas, unflinching in cases of police brutality and voting rights violations. Her reputation was built not on flash but on results. She had arrived early, reviewed her notes twice, and waited quietly for the cameras to roll. She wore a small golden Capitol Dome pin on her lapel, a simple emblem of duty that contrasted with Patel's ostentatious cufflinks. The studio staff prepped them quickly. "We'll begin with the Justice Department's independence," the producer explained, then shift to oversight and congressional powers. Patel nodded confidently. This was his territory. Crockett simply listened. Inside her folder was research on Patel's past, his time at DOJ, his record as a public defender, even a few items that hadn't made headlines. If provoked, she was ready. The floor director raised a hand. "We're live in 30. Red lights glowed atop the cameras. Barnes looked directly into the lens. "Good evening, America. Tonight on Democracy in the Balance, we examine the growing conflict between Congress and the Justice Department. Joining us are former Defense Department official Kash Patel and Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett." Neither guest knew the conversation would soon break free from prepared notes and turn into a televised reckoning. For the first 15 minutes, the debate moved smoothly, structured, civil, predictable. Barnes guided the discussion through oversight powers, separation of powers, prosecutorial independence. Both guests traded partisan lines like seasoned debaters. Then Barnes turned to Crockett. "Congresswoman, your questioning during last week's hearing drew significant attention. Critics said you were grandstanding. How do you respond?" Crockett clasped her hands together and leaned forward. "I was doing my job," she said calmly. "When taxpayers send us to Washington, they expect accountability. The American people deserve to know whether justice applies equally, no matter who you are." Across the table, Patel scoffed. Barnes noticed. "Mr. Patel?" Patel smirked. "What we saw from the Congresswoman was theater, not oversight. When I was at the Department of Justice, and later at the Pentagon, I watched politicians like her undermine serious work for the sake of camera time." Crockett's brow lifted slightly. Interesting words from someone accused of politicizing intelligence to serve Donald Trump's narrative. A flash of anger crossed Patel's face. "That's false. I served honorably. I understand how DOJ really works." "As do I," Crockett replied smoothly. Patel waved dismissively. "Civil rights law in Dallas isn't the same as federal criminal prosecution, Congresswoman. We're talking about matters of national security." The condescension hung thick in the air. Barnes tried to interject, but Patel continued, his voice rising. "With all due respect, handling minor state cases doesn't qualify you to lecture people who actually managed federal investigations. I prosecuted terrorism cases. That's the big leagues." The insult landed like a slap. The audience fell silent. Crockett inhaled once, then exhaled slowly. Her expression didn't change. "Mr. Patel," she said, voice even, "would you like to reconsider that statement about my background? Or shall I correct it for you?" He gave a small laugh. "By all means, enlighten us." She nodded, unclasped her folder, and slid a document toward him. "Before I came to Congress," she began, her tone controlled and deliberate, "I represented civil rights cases that set legal precedent in Texas courts. I argued before the Texas Supreme Court. I served as president of the Dallas Criminal Bar Association. And unlike you, Mr. Patel, I've never faced professional discipline of any kind." Patel frowned. "What are you insinuating?" "I'm not insinuating anything," Crockett said, pushing the document closer. "This is a copy of the disciplinary action filed against you when you were a public defender in Florida. Would you like to explain it to the viewers, or should I?" A murmur ran through the studio audience. Patel's smile faltered. "That's a distortion." "Public record," Crockett replied evenly. "It states you failed to disclose exculpatory evidence. For the non-lawyers watching, that means you withheld evidence that could have helped your client." Barnes's mouth opened slightly. The control room whispered frantic instructions into his earpiece. But on set, no one could look away. "That's a cheap shot," Patel snapped. "You came here to attack me personally." "I came here with facts," Crockett said softly. "You came here with arrogance." She turned to the moderator. "When someone publicly questions my qualifications, it's only fair that we look at theirs." She drew another page from the folder. "After your stint as a public defender, you joined the Department of Justice, correct?" Patel hesitated. "Yes. And during that time," she continued, "you were investigated for mishandling classified information, an investigation that conveniently disappeared when the administration changed." Patel raised his voice. "That was politically motivated and found no wrongdoing." Crockett smiled faintly. "Just as you claim every investigation into your allies is political. Curious how that works." Then she looked directly into the camera. "That's what hypocrisy looks like." The audience erupted into hushed astonishment. Patel tried to recover. "You're twisting events to make headlines." Crockett ignored him. "You told America I need to go back to law school. But I passed the bar on my first try. It took you 3 attempts in Florida, one of the easier jurisdictions in the country. Should we talk about preparation?" The studio gasped. Patel's composure evaporated. Barnes tried to interject again. "Let's steer back to policy." "One moment, Michael," Crockett said sharply. "He opened this door. I'm simply stepping through it." She turned back to Patel. "You boasted about your experience at the National Counterterrorism Center. Yet internal reports noted concern from career officials about your lack of background in counterterrorism before your appointment. Do you deny that?" Patel clenched his jaw. "Anonymous sources. Fake leaks." "Of course," she said with measured sarcasm. "Everyone who criticizes you must be lying." Crockett folded her hands neatly. "Let me clarify for anyone still uncertain about my record. I've practiced constitutional law, civil rights law, and criminal defense. I've argued before federal courts. My record, ethically and professionally, is spotless." She paused. Can you say the same, Mr. Patel? The red light atop the central camera blinked. Barnes, sensing the tension, signaled for a commercial break. "We'll be right back," he said, his voice shaky. As the cameras went dark, Patel leaned across the desk. "This is an ambush." Crockett looked him straight in the eye. "No, this is accountability. You should recognize it." When the cameras came back from the break, the air in the studio felt thicker, heavier, charged with something that couldn't be undone. The sound technicians adjusted their headsets in silence. Viewers at home had no idea that off-camera, Kash Patel had been visibly shaken, his composure shredded. Moderator Michael Barnes cleared his throat and forced a neutral smile. "Welcome back to Democracy in the Balance." Before the break, we had a spirited exchange between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Mr. Patel. Let's refocus now on the broader implications. But Crockett wasn't finished. "Before we move on, Michael," she said, raising a hand, "I think the viewers deserve one final point of clarity." Patel's jaw tensed. Crockett placed her hands flat on the table. "I didn't come here to trade insults. I came because the stakes are higher than any of us. Our democracy only works when truth matters. So when someone questions my qualifications to discuss the Justice Department, I'll respond with facts, not fiction." Her tone wasn't fiery. It was steady, precise, surgical. She turned to Patel. "You mocked my legal background. You suggested I'm unfit to comment on federal law. But what I see is a man whose record shows lapses in ethics, failed oversight, and political favoritism. I see someone who leveraged national security work for partisan ends. And most of all, I see someone terrified of being challenged by a woman who came prepared." Patel tried to interject, but she pressed on. "So the next time you or anyone else feels tempted to dismiss my credentials, remember this moment. Remember that I showed up with the truth, and you showed up with arrogance." She looked straight into the camera. "That's the difference between performance and preparation." A deep silence filled the studio. Even the audience seemed to hold its breath. Barnes blinked, visibly stunned. "Thank you, Congresswoman. Moving on." But the moment was already bigger than the program. As the red recording lights dimmed and the segment wrapped, everyone in the control room knew they had just witnessed something seismic. When the broadcast ended, Patel ripped off his microphone without a word. His expression was tight, his lips pale. He brushed past staff and stormed toward the exit. His press aide scurried behind him, phone in hand, whispering damage control instructions. Crockett remained in her seat. She thanked the moderator and crew politely, gathered her documents, and walked calmly toward the green room. Her stride was deliberate, her posture upright, the same quiet confidence that had carried her through the confrontation. Behind the closed door of the green room, she finally exhaled. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications, messages, emails. She ignored most of them and poured a cup of water, her hands steady. Across social media, the firestorm had already begun. Within minutes, clips of the exchange flooded Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The moment she slid Patel's disciplinary record across the table was replayed, slowed down, and memified within hours. A trending clip titled, "Crockett Destroys Kash Patel, Live with Facts," hit 100,000 views before midnight. Hashtags like "Shy Crockett Cooks," "Cash Out," and "Receipts" ready dominated the trending list. Progressive commentators were ecstatic. "This is what happens when you underestimate a black woman with credentials," one user tweeted. Crockett didn't just win an argument. She demonstrated integrity under fire. Civil rights lawyers and activists flooded the timeline with messages of support. One viral tweet from an attorney read, "Every black woman professional has lived this moment, being talked down to by someone less qualified." Crockett didn't just defend herself. She defended all of us. Meanwhile, conservative voices accused CNN of staging an ambush. "Classic Democrat smear tactics," one right-wing pundit posted. "They bring research files to attack instead of discussing policy." Media bias 101. Crockett gets to rant uninterrupted while Patel gets cut off. Yet, even among conservative analysts, a few broke ranks. A well-known right-leaning legal expert tweeted, "Whatever your politics, Patel made a rookie mistake. Never attack someone's credentials unless you're absolutely sure your own record is spotless. By sunrise, democracy in the balance was everywhere. Morning shows played the clip in full. On Good Morning America, political analyst Rebecca Johnson said, "What we saw wasn't just a takedown. It was a masterclass in preparation and restraint." Crockett didn't just defend herself. She reframed the entire debate around accountability. At CNN headquarters, producers congratulated each other on record-breaking overnight numbers. In Washington, congressional offices buzzed with chatter. Crockett's phone never stopped ringing. Colleagues, journalists, and aides calling to applaud her composure. For Patel, the opposite was true. His team spent the morning drafting a statement. By noon, he released it through his spokesperson. Last night's segment was intended to be a good-faith discussion about constitutional oversight. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Crockett chose to ambush me with cherry-picked details from my past. While I regret that my comments were misinterpreted as disrespectful, I stand by my concerns about congressional overreach. The statement did little to stem the backlash. Commentators noted Patel hadn't denied the facts Crockett presented, nor apologized for his remarks. The press dubbed it a non-apology from a cornered man. Crockett, on the other hand, kept her tone measured. Late that afternoon, she released a single written response. "Last night, I defended not just my own record, but the principle that public servants should be judged by merit, not prejudice. I came to Congress to fight for transparency and justice. I hope future debates focus on those values rather than personal attacks." It was calm, concise, and devastatingly effective. Within days, the ripple effects spread through Washington. Democratic leaders recognized a rising star. Crockett's office was inundated with media requests, invitations, and praise from senior figures who had previously overlooked her. The party's digital team immediately clipped her exchange with Patel into fundraising emails. One subject line read, "She came prepared. Will we?" Donations surged. Meanwhile, Republican strategists privately expressed frustration. "He took the bait," one GOP consultant told Politico. "You don't punch down on live TV unless you're certain you'll win." Patel forgot that. Inside conservative circles, Patel's reputation suffered. He had been the confident insider, the Trump-era loyalist who prided himself on sharp intellect and defiance. Now he was the man outmaneuvered by a freshman congresswoman with a folder of receipts. Even law schools took notice. Professors in advocacy and media training courses began showing the clip as a case study, an example of rhetorical control under pressure. "This is how you use facts to dismantle arrogance," one Georgetown lecturer said. A week later, polling data told the story in numbers. Jasmine Crockett's national name recognition had soared by 15 points. Her favorability rating climbed sharply among young voters, women, and professionals of color. When respondents were asked what stood out most about her, 3 words dominated: prepared, smart, fearless. For Patel, the damage was visible. His favorability among independents dipped, and descriptors like arrogant and unprepared appeared repeatedly in pollster notes. Within the halls of Congress, colleagues began to treat Crockett differently. Even opponents approached her with newfound caution. One senior Republican, who had once dismissed her as a rookie firebrand, publicly conceded during a committee hearing, "The gentlewoman from Texas raises a fair and legally sound point." It was subtle, but meaningful. The confrontation had changed her standing overnight. Weeks later, Crockett received a surprise call from party leadership. She was being appointed to the House Judiciary Committee, a prestigious assignment rarely given to a freshman member. When she took her new seat in the hearing room for the first time, the polished mahogany walls and engraved nameplates felt symbolic. She had earned her place there not through seniority, but through substance. That afternoon, as she listened to testimony from Justice Department officials, she caught a few sideways glances, quiet nods of respect from colleagues who now understood her differently. Her composure was the same as it had been in the CNN studio. Unflappable, deliberate, grounded in law and truth. The impact of that confrontation rippled far beyond politics. In workplaces, classrooms and courtrooms across the country, people who had been dismissed, doubted, or underestimated found inspiration in her response. Social media brimmed with stories of professionals preparing their own Crockett folders, collections of facts, receipts, and evidence ready for the day someone questioned their worth. In law schools, students replayed the viral clip not just for entertainment, but as an example of poise under fire. Professors called it a turning point in how women of color are seen in legal and political authority. The debate had begun as just another partisan panel, but it ended as something much deeper, a cultural touchstone. Months later, during a live town hall in Dallas, a young woman stood to ask a question. "Congresswoman," she said nervously, "that night on CNN, you didn't just defend yourself. You defended all of us who get talked down to in rooms where we know just as much. How did you stay calm?" Crockett smiled. "Preparation," she answered simply, "and the understanding that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up." The audience erupted in applause. In political documentaries, articles, and online retrospectives, the confrontation would later be described as the night arrogance met accountability. It became shorthand for what happens when someone walks into a debate thinking they're the smartest person in the room and discovers they're not even the most prepared. Years later, journalists still referenced it whenever a candidate underestimated an opponent. Campaign strategists studied it as a case study in composure under pressure. And in the halls of power, Jasmine Crockett's name carried weight far beyond her tenure. She had turned mockery into mastery, insult into influence, and live television into history. In a single night, she proved that preparation, not power, defines credibility, and for millions watching, that truth resonated long after the studio lights dimmed.